Hello, welcome to Quantum Freedom. My name is Jordan. Today we are continuing our series on Neville Goddard's 5 lessons with Lesson 2, Assumptions Hardened Into Facts. This episode is meant to be a companion and commentary to Neville's original lecture. I will link the source material in the description. My goal here is to make the lecture easier to understand, especially if you are new to Neville, New Thought, mystical Christianity, or symbolic Bible interpretation. In Lesson 1, Neville established the basic premise of his whole system. Consciousness is the only reality. Your awareness of being, your I am, is the creative power behind your experience. The world you see around you is not separate from consciousness in the way we normally assume. It is consciousness made visible. Lesson 2 builds on that idea and gives us the phrase Neville is well known for. Assumptions, though false, if sustained, will harden into fact. That sentence is simple, but it is also easy to misunderstand. Neville is not saying to lie to yourself in a shallow way. He is talking about the creative use of imagination. He is saying that if you can inwardly occupy the state of the person you desire to be, and if you remain faithful to that state, the outer world will eventually reorganize itself to match that assumption. The assumption may be false to your present senses. Your bank account may not show it yet. Your health may not show it yet. Your relationships may not show it yet. And your career may not show it yet. But Neville's claim is that the senses report the past. They show you what has already become fixed. Imagination is where the next state is selected. This lesson is about changing states. And Neville uses several Bible stories to explain how that change happens. He talks about the trial of Jesus in the Gospel of John, the release of Barabbas, the Garden of Gethsemane, Joshua and Jericho, Rahab the spy and harlot, the tabernacle in the book of Numbers, the cloud by day and fire by night, and finally, the practical method of entering a state akin to sleep. As always with Neville, he is not reading these stories as literal history. He reads them psychologically. Every character is a function of your own consciousness. Every city, garden, mountain, cloud, and temple is a symbol of something taking place within you. The first major story Neville uses in this lecture is from the Gospel of John. This is the trial of Jesus before Pontius Pilate. In the outer story, Jesus is brought before Pilate. The crowd wants someone to release because of a Passover custom. Pilate asks if they want Jesus released, but the crowd asks for Barabbas instead. John tells us Barabbas was a robber. On the surface, this looks like a political and religious scene. Neville reads it as an inner drama. Pontius Pilate represents judgment, and judgment in the symbolic sense is blind. Think of the common image of Lady Justice wearing a blindfold. True judgment does not judge by appearances. This connects to John 7, where Jesus says to judge not by appearance, but with righteous judgment. In Neville's reading, Pontius Pilate is the faculty in you that must decide which state will be released and which state will be fixed. Barabbas and Jesus are the two states being judged. The name Barabbas comes from the Hebrew words bar and Abba, meaning son of the Father. Jesus is also the son of the Father, so we have two sons. This is very similar to the story of Isaac, Esau, and Jacob from Lesson 1. There are two possible states before you. One is the present state, the state that limits you. The other is the desired state, the state that saves you from what you have been. Barabbas is called a robber because the present state robs you of what you could be. This is subtle, so let us make it practical. If you want security but keep walking around inwardly as someone unsafe and unsupported, that present state is Barabbas. If you want love but live inwardly as someone unwanted, that state is Barabbas. If you want creative success but remain loyal to the feeling that your work does not matter, that state is Barabbas. It may feel realistic, it may have evidence, but the present state is still the robber. Jesus in this story represents the Savior. But Neville's meaning of Savior is not primarily a person outside you rescuing you from life. Your Savior is the state that would save you from your present limitation, abundance instead of poverty, health instead of sickness, dignity instead of shame, love instead of loneliness. So when the crowd chooses Barabbas to be set free, that means letting the robber go free while letting Jesus, the desired state, become fixed in your consciousness. This is the trial within consciousness. Neville connects this with the Passover. In the Bible, Passover is the great feast of deliverance. In the Hebrew Bible, it is connected with Israel escaping Egypt. In the Gospel story, it is the time of Jesus' trial and crucifixion. Mystically, Passover means passing over from one state of consciousness to another. That is the whole point. You pass over from being the person who lacks the thing to being the person who has it. You pass over from fear to fulfillment, from wanting to being, from desiring to having. But you cannot pass over while keeping the old state alive. This is why Barabbas must be released. It sounds backwards at first, because in the literal story, Barabbas goes free and Jesus is crucified. But esoteric interpretation is that Barabbas is released from consciousness. The old thief is let go. Jesus, the desired state, is crucified in the place of the skull. The place of the skull is Golgotha. Symbolically, the skull points to the head, the imagination, the seat of inner vision. To crucify the desired state means to fix it in consciousness. You fasten it there. You do not let it drift away as a nice idea. You nail it into the imagination by assuming that it is true of you now. Then, if you remain faithful, it resurrects. The state you fixed inwardly rises outwardly. What was invisible becomes visible. What was imagined becomes embodied. What was assumed becomes fact. Neville gives a very practical test for whether you have changed states. He says to look mentally at the people you know. Do they seem to relate to you the same way as before? Do you expect the same reactions, same judgments, same limitations, same conversations? If everyone in your inner world still sees you as the old person, then your concept of yourself has probably not changed. This is useful because many people imagine a desire as though they are watching a movie. They picture themselves with the thing, but they do not actually move into the first-person identity of having it. Neville wants you to imagine from the new state. If you were truly secure, how would your mother sound when she talks to you? If you were truly successful, how would your friend congratulate you? If you were truly healthy, how would your doctor speak? If your relationship were healed, what ordinary sentence would your partner say that implies everything is different now? This is how you conduct the trial. You choose which state receives life. Now Neville turns to another scene from John 18, the Garden of Gethsemane. Gethsemane is the place where Jesus is found before the arrest. Neville interprets a garden as a prepared mind. A garden is not wild ground. It has been cultivated. Soil has been turned, seeds have been planted, weeds have been removed. For those interested in the tarot, the symbolism of the garden is depicted in Tarot Key 1, the Magician. Your mind becomes a garden when you begin to discipline your attention. This does not mean becoming tense or joyless. It means you stop feeding every thought that passes by. You stop giving your full attention to conversations, media, gossip, fears, and inner monologues that drag you back into the state you are trying to leave. Neville references Philippians 4 here, where Paul says to think on things that are true, honest, just, pure, lovely, and of good report. That is mental gardening. In the story, a crowd comes seeking Jesus. Jesus asks, "Whom seek ye?" They answer that they seek Jesus of Nazareth. He says, "I am he," and they fall to the ground. Again, Neville does not take this as a literal crowd falling over because one man spoke. He reads it symbolically. When you say "I am" with conviction, the old crowd of thoughts falls. The old mental opposition loses power. The statement "I am" is not just grammar. It is the name of God operating in you. Whatever you attach to "I am" becomes creative. I am loved. I am free. I am chosen. I am healthy. I am already the one I desired to become. The next figure in this scene is Judas. In the ordinary reading, Judas betrays Jesus. Neville interprets Judas psychologically. Judas, like the name Judah, is connected with praise or thanksgiving. He also commits suicide in the wider gospel drama. This may sound dark on the surface, but the real meaning is inner death. Judas represents the old self dying by your own hand. No one takes your inner life. You lay it down. In practical terms, this means you stop identifying with the old identity. You stop saying, "Well, this is just who I am." You stop telling the same story of why your desire cannot happen. You stop returning to the old name, old wound, old role, old limitation, and calling it realistic. To assume the new state is to let the former unwanted state die. It is psychological suicide in the symbolic sense. The old man is no longer fed by attention. The old version of you is no longer given the throne. This is not self-hatred. It is not violence against yourself. It is more like putting down a costume you no longer choose to wear. If you have been the person who never gets picked, Judas is the act of letting that identity die. If you have been the person who is always broke, Judas is the act of letting that identity die. If you have been the person who cannot change, Judas is the act of letting that identity die. And the sign that you have found the new state is praise, thanksgiving, relief, inner satisfaction. You are no longer begging for the thing. You are inwardly grateful because you have accepted it. This is why phrases like "thank you" work so well in Neville's method. Gratitude implies fulfillment of your desire. You do not sincerely say thank you for something you believe is completely absent. Thanksgiving is a psychological marker of acceptance. So in this Gospel of John, Neville is teaching one basic operation. Release Barabbas, the old state that robs you. Fix Jesus, the desired state, in imagination. Prepare the garden of the mind. Let the old identity die. Pass over into new concept of self. Next, Neville turns to the Old Testament, especially the book of Joshua. He connects Jesus with Joshua because the names are related. In Gematria, the names Jesus and Joshua both add to the number 74. The names Jesus, Joshua, Yeshua, and Jehoshua all point toward the idea of salvation and mean the phrase, Jehovah saves. Neville also calls Joshua Jehoshua ben Nun. Ben means son, Nun means fish, so he reads the name as the Savior, son of the fish, the Savior of the great deep. The deep is important in mystical language. It means the depths of consciousness, the hidden unseen source, the place from which forms arise. In Joshua chapter 1, God tells Joshua that every place the sole of his foot treads has been given to him. If you read that literally, it sounds like a land promised, but Neville reads it psychologically. The foot represents understanding. To stand somewhere mentally is to understand yourself as being there. Wherever you can stand in consciousness, you can realize. This is why Neville constantly says to make elsewhere here and the future now. If you can inwardly stand in the state of being loved, that state has been given to you. If you can inwardly stand in the state of being prosperous, that state has been given to you. If you can inwardly stand in the state of being healed, that state has been given to you. This does not mean daydreaming about it from a distance. It means occupying it, standing in it, mentally feeling the ground of that state beneath your feet. Joshua desires Jericho. In the Bible, Jericho is a city with walls. Symbolically, Jericho is the desired state. The word Jericho suggests a fragrant odor, something delightful, something satisfying. But Joshua is outside the walls. That is exactly how desire feels. The thing you want appears real, but inaccessible. It is in front of you, but walled off. Your senses say no, reason says no, circumstances say no, people may say no. Your own memory says no. These are the walls of Jericho. Maybe you want a certain kind of work, but you do not have the credentials. You want a calmer nervous system, but your body has been trained by years of stress. Maybe you want to be loved, but your past has taught you to expect abandonment. Perhaps you want to create publicly, but you have a wall of embarrassment, perfectionism, and old criticism around you. Neville says you do not break these walls by force. You do not argue with them all day. You do not stare at them and describe how thick they are. Instead, you employ Rahab. Rahab is one of the strangest and most interesting symbols in this lecture. In the book of Joshua, Rahab is a harlot in Jericho who hides Israelite spies. She helps Joshua's men, and when the city falls, she is saved. Rahab has two professions, spy and harlot. Let us take the spy first. A spy travels secretly. A spy enters a place without being detected. Neville says your imagination can do this perfectly. You can sit physically in one room while inwardly entering another place, another condition, another state. No one can look at you and know exactly where you are dwelling in imagination. You may be sitting quietly on a couch, but inwardly you are imagining being in the apartment you want to live in. Mentally open the fridge. You imaginally hear the sound of the street outside. You touch the countertop. You are lying in the bed as if it is yours. Or you might be sitting at your current job, but inwardly you are being congratulated for the work you actually want. You feel the handshake, you hear the sentence, and you accept the praise. You may be alone, but inwardly you are hearing a significant other say something that implies a loving relationship. This is spying in the mystical sense. Consciousness enters the state secretly before the body gets there. Now, the second profession, Rahab as harlot. This can sound morally charged to modern listeners, but Neville is using the symbol in a specific way. A harlot, in his reading, symbolically gives what is asked for without questioning the person's right to ask. She does not demand credentials or ask whether you deserve it. She grants the request. Psychologically, Rahab is your capacity to appropriate a state. Your imagination does not ask whether you have earned the right to feel love, success, health, or wealth. It can give you those feelings now. This is radical. Most of us wait for permission from the outside world before we change our inner state. We say, once they treat me differently, then I will feel chosen. Or, Once the money comes, then I will feel secure, or once the opportunity arrives, then I will feel legitimate. Neville reverses that order. You appropriate the state first. You let Rahab give it to you. You occupy the state inwardly before the city opens outwardly. In the Joshua story, Rahab is told to stay in the house in Jericho. Do not go from house to house. Remain in the upper room. Symbolically, this means do not wander mentally. Stay in the house. The house is the state you have entered. The upper room is the higher level of consciousness from which the desire is already fulfilled. This is also why Neville says there is a difference between holding an idea and being held by an idea. Holding an idea can be still casual. You think about it occasionally. You like it. You hope it happens. Being held by an idea means the state possesses you. It becomes natural. It becomes the direction of your mind. You are no longer forcing it every second. You are inwardly claimed by it. Then we come to the walls of Jericho falling. In Joshua chapter 6, the Israelites march around Jericho. The priests blow trumpets. The seventh time the trumpets sound, the walls fall. Neville interprets the number 7 as Sabbath, rest, stillness. The seventh day is not just a calendar day. It is the state of completion. It is the inner rest that comes when you are no longer struggling to make the thing happen. This is important because many people try to manifest from tension. They imagine, but they check their 3D reality for signs. They affirm, but they are straining. They say the words, but underneath the words is panic. Neville's Sabbath is the opposite of panic. Entering the Sabbath is entering the desired state so completely that you are at rest. You are still. You know inwardly that the thing is done. That stillness is the seventh trumpet. And when that point is reached, the walls crumble of their own weight. Circumstances change. People move. Timing shifts. An idea comes. A meeting happens. A door opens. The bridge of events to fulfilling your desire begins to form in ways the smaller mind could not have arranged. Neville is very clear that you do not have to know how your desire will manifest. The dimensionally greater self knows the means. The conscious waking self only has to assume the end. For example, let us say you want better work. The ordinary mind tries to solve the whole thing. Which company? Which posting? Which connection? What if my resume is not enough? What if the market is bad? What if I am too late? Neville would say, choose an imaginal act that implies the end. Maybe a friend says, you seem so much happier since you started that new position. Or you see yourself closing your laptop at the end of a satisfying workday. Or you feel yourself calmly paying your bills with money from work you enjoy. Enter that. Stay in that house. Let it become natural. Act normally as life moves you. You may still send the application or revise the resume, but you are no longer acting from the state of I am outside the walls. You are acting from the state of I have entered Jericho. That is Joshua's conquest. Now Neville turns to the book of Numbers, chapter 9. This is the story of the tabernacle in the wilderness. In the biblical text, the tabernacle is the movable sanctuary of Israel. It is a sacred tent. The cloud covers it by day, and the appearance of fire rests on it by night. When the cloud rises, Israel journeys. When the cloud remains, Israel stays. Neville reads the tabernacle as the human body. He points out that the tabernacle is elongated, movable, and covered with skin. That is mankind. That is you. He connects this with the New Testament idea from 1 Corinthians chapter 3. Ye are the temple of God. The temple is not ultimately a building made with hands. The living temple is consciousness embodied. So when Numbers describes the tabernacle moving through the wilderness, this is actually symbolizing you moving through life. The wilderness is the world. From birth to death, we move through a kind of desert. We are searching, desiring, fearing, building, losing, finding, changing. But within this moving tabernacle is the presence of God, which Neville identifies as your own awareness of being. Then comes the cloud. In Numbers chapter 9, the cloud rests on the tabernacle by day, and the appearance of fire is there by night. When the cloud lifts, the people journey. When it stays, they remain. Neville connects this with meditation and the state akin to sleep. He says that in meditation, some people may actually perceive inner phenomena. Clouds, golden rings, blue light, subtle movement. He talks about these experiences in the lecture. We do not need to force that part. You do not need to see golden rings or blue light to practice this teaching. Some people have visual inner experiences, some do not. The method does not depend on chasing mystical special effects. The main point is this. When you enter the drowsy, meditative state, consciousness becomes mobile. The cloud ascends. Your attention is no longer locked so tightly to the physical environment. That is when you move the tabernacle. In plain language, when the body is still and the mind is relaxed, you place consciousness in the desired state. Where consciousness goes, the body and world eventually follow. This is why Neville says to use the interval before sleep wisely. The mood that dominates you as you fall asleep is powerful. If you fall asleep in fear, resentment, self-pity, or rehearsal of failure, you are impressing those states. If you fall asleep in the feeling of the wish fulfilled, you are commanding the deeper creative process in a different direction. This does not mean you should become afraid of every bad thought before bed. That just creates more strain. It means the period before sleep is valuable. Treat it as sacred. Treat it like the tabernacle is about to move. Neville gives two main ways to use this drowsy state. The first is the imaginal scene. You decide what you want, then you construct a short scene that would naturally happen after the desire is fulfilled. It should be something simple. A handshake, a hug, a congratulatory sentence, looking at a bank balance calmly, wearing the ring, opening the door to the new home, hearing a doctor say, "Everything looks good," feeling your body move freely, reading the email that confirms the result. The scene must imply fulfillment. This point matters. Do not imagine trying to get the thing. Imagine from after it is already done. If you want a new apartment, do not imagine filling out applications while anxious. Imagine sleeping in your bed there. Imagine setting your keys on the counter. Imagine a friend visiting and saying, "This place feels like you." If you want a healed relationship, do not imagine drafting the perfect text. Instead, imagine the natural conversation that would happen after the relationship is warm again. Hear the tone, feel the relief, let it feel natural. If you want financial stability, do not imagine checking your account in fear. Imagine paying something easily. Imagine saying, "That's handled." Imagine the feeling of relief. Then, in the state akin to sleep, you enter the scene in first person. You do not watch yourself like a character on a screen. You feel yourself there. You see through your own eyes. You hear from your own position. You touch what you would touch. You let the scene repeat until it has the feeling of reality. Neville calls this a controlled waking dream. That phrase is very helpful. In an ordinary dream, you are inside the experience. You do not usually stand outside analyzing the dream as a spectator. You are in it. You are walking, talking, touching, reacting. Neville wants you to create the same kind of inner participation while still awake enough to guide the dream. A controlled waking dream is not tense visualization. It is not trying to see everything in high definition. It is not mental force. It is a relaxed, inward participation from the end result of your desire. The second method is the short phrase, sometimes called the lullaby method. If you cannot hold a scene, reduce the desire to a phrase that implies fulfillment. Neville gives examples like, "Isn't it wonderful? Thank you. It's done. It's finished." He says the phrase should be very short. 3 words or so is enough. The purpose is to not chant magic words mechanically. The phrase is a character for the feeling. It should imply that the desire has already been realized. Thank you implies reception of the desire. It's done implies completion. Isn't it wonderful implies that something good has happened and you are living in the afterglow. You repeat it gently, like a lullaby, as you fall asleep. This is where Neville introduces the law of reverse effort. The law of reverse effort means that too much force produces the opposite of what you intend. If you try hard to sleep, you stay awake. If you try hard not to be anxious, anxiety often increases. If you try hard to force a feeling, you usually reinforce the feeling that you do not have it. Neville says the creative act must be done with minimum effort. You control the direction of attention, but lightly. You choose the state, but you do not strain. You enter the feeling, but you do not wrestle it to the ground. This is one reason the state akin to sleep is so useful. And effort naturally decreases. The body relaxes. The rational guard softens. You can accept the imagined state more easily. Think of it like floating. If you thrash in the water, you sink or exhaust yourself. If you relax and position yourself correctly, the water holds you. The same is true inwardly. You are not trying to overpower the old state. You are relaxing into the new one until it feels natural. Neville also gives a warning in this section. He says not to treat this lightly. He tells a personal story about imagining himself in Barbados, sleeping under palm trees during winter in New York. He did not consciously intend to travel there, but circumstances arose that compelled the trip. His point is that imagination is causal. Do not play with states you do not want to actually embody. Be deliberate with what you dwell in. Do not spend your inner life rehearsing disasters just to test whether imagination works. Do not build scenes of rejection, conflict, or humiliation, and then wonder why your nervous system lives as if they are real. Your attention is not trivial. This does not mean you must police yourself with fear. It means you treat imagination as a creative faculty. This also gives a more compassionate reading of mental discipline. Neville is not asking you to become stiff or fake. He is asking you to stop carelessly occupying states you do not want to reproduce. If you catch yourself rehearsing an argument, pause. If you catch yourself imagining failure, pause. If you catch yourself internally explaining why nothing changes, pause. Then choose again. Return to the house. Return to the short phrase. Return to the imaginal scene. Return to Sabbath. This is the actual practice. To summarize Lesson 2, Neville is teaching that assumptions harden into facts. The Bible stories are not distant religious history. They are symbolic instructions for the use of consciousness. In John chapter 18, Barabbas is the old state that robs you. Jesus is the desired state that saves you. Pontius Pilate is blind judgment, and Passover is the movement from one state of consciousness to another. Gethsemane is the prepared mind. Judas is the old self dying by your own act of detachment. Praise and thanksgiving are signs that you have accepted the new state. In Joshua, Jericho is the desired state surrounded by the walls of sense and reason. Rahab is your secret imaginative faculty, the spy who enters unseen, and your power to appropriate the state without asking the outer world for permission. The walls fall when you reach the Sabbath, the inner stillness of completion. In Numbers chapter 9, the tabernacle is you. The cloud by day and fire by night represent consciousness becoming mobile in meditation and sleep. When the cloud ascends, you move inwardly into the state desired. Where consciousness is placed, the body and world eventually follow. The practical method is simple. Know what you want. Create a short scene or phrase that implies it is already fulfilled. Enter a relaxed, drowsy state. Experience the scene in first person or repeat the phrase gently. Fall asleep or rest in the feeling of completion. Then remain faithful to the new state as best as you can. For your practice, try this tonight. Choose one desire. Keep it clean and simple. Ask yourself what would naturally happen after the desire was already true. Build a 5-second scene. Maybe someone congratulates you. Maybe you touch an object. Maybe you hear a sentence. Maybe you say, "Thank you," and feel relief. When you get into bed, relax your body and let yourself become sleepy. Then enter into the scene. Do not watch yourself. Be there. Feel it. Repeat it gently until it starts to feel natural or until you drift into sleep. If you cannot hold the scene, use a phrase like "thank you" or "it's done." Let it be soft. Let it be enough. And when you wake up, do not dig it up. Do not spend the day asking whether it worked. Walk as someone who has planted the seed. That is the practice of Lesson 2. If you liked this episode, please subscribe and check out the links in the description. And be sure to join me next time for Lesson 3, Thinking Fourth Dimensionally.